Good morning, and thanks for joining us this morning. This is our final startup grind of 2021, and it's brought to you by Spark Center in partnership with Launch Lab, a fellow regional innovation center in Kingston. My name is Hailey Wright, and I'm the Director of Economic Development Services here at the City of Oshawa. I joined the city approximately 6 months ago, but the innovation entrepreneurship landscape in this community is not new to me, as I spent 10 years working in the post-secondary sector right here in Oshawa. I'm looking forward to working with many of you in my new capacity. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you to Spark for inviting me to join the discussion today. I'm thrilled to be here. Now that you've learned a little bit about me and where I am from, I'd encourage you to use the event chat to share with you where you're from and how we can connect with you post-event. Share your company, your name, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever suits you best over in the comments section. Before we begin, we would like to thank Spark Center's elite partners, MNP Assurance and Accounting Services, Burskin and Parr LLP, Roughly Insurance, Finance Without Borders, Sharesh Law Professional Corporation, and Spark Innovations. A reminder to stay tuned after the interview for networking. If you haven't tried networking on the Hopin platform before, it's fun, easy, and a great way to meet some new faces today. Now, to get to the portion of today that we're all so excited about, I'd like to welcome Jennifer Osborne, President and CEO, Search Engine People, to the stage. Search Engine People has been dominating search since Google was a toddler. Recognized leaders in digital marketing, Search Engine People has top-level partnership with every major digital platform, including Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, and Pinterest. Jennifer serves on Google's Agency Advisory Committee. She has been interviewed by the Globe and Mail, the New York Times, and Profit Magazine, and was ranked number 10 by Profit and Chatelaine magazines on the Profit W100 Top Female Entrepreneurs in Canada, and is on the Great Places to Work Top 25 Companies Run by Women in Canada. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Wonderful. So we are going to hop right into questions. We do have some questions ready for you, Jennifer, and I'd encourage all of you watching today, any questions that you have, please put in the comment section. We'll be monitoring throughout, and I'll weave those in as we go. So let's start with sort of a big high-level question off the bat, Jennifer. How did Search Engine People get started?
So it's an interesting story. I didn't start Search Engine People. It was started by Jeff Quip, who is also my husband. And Jeff was in charge of traffic for a major website. And so this was back in 2000, 1999. And he tried to hire a couple of SEO companies to help optimize the website for search engines. And both of those companies took them for a ride. And one actually even got them banned on Google. And so he thought, if there isn't an honest company out here, maybe I could be that honest company. But just to put it in perspective, 2001 was really sort of the infancy of digital. Digital is kind of like dog years, like that was eons ago. So, in 2001, Google wasn't the primary search engine. It was Alta Vista and Yahoo. And eBay and Amazon were around, but they hadn't made money yet. And we didn't know yet if we'd be able to make money online, like e-commerce. So he was really, really visionary. And basically his first purchase was Internet for Dummies. And he was a business person who had to teach himself the technical, as opposed to a lot of other people are technical people who have to learn the business. So that's kind of how we got started. And then I joined a few years later as the company was growing and needed more non-technical support.
Thanks, Jennifer. So, understanding all of that time and your comment around, dog years in digital sort of stands out to me. What were some of the challenges that you had to overcome?
So one of our biggest challenges at the time, in addition to the normal challenges small businesses face, was that this was an entirely new industry, and people didn't teach this. The schools didn't teach digital marketing yet. So we were figuring it out as we went. But on top of that, then as the business was growing, how do you staff? How do you fulfill and keep up with demand when they don't teach what you do at school? So we had to be super, super creative, because essentially we put an ad out and we would get 400-500 resumes and none of them were qualified. So what do you do with that? Like we felt like we had to meet people and really figure out who was worth investing in. And so we took people who were working at Subway or Sobeys or retail, and we trained them in digital marketing. But figuring out, who do you invest in was really hard. So one of the things that we came up with is we started doing group interviews, because I was doing the hiring at the time. And I felt like if I brought someone in for an interview, I owed them at least half an hour, like if they come all the way down to our office. But we couldn't, if we get 400 resumes and only interview 10 people, that's not really a good cross section, right? To find that best person. So we came up with the idea of group interviews and brought people in 10 at a time and organized the interview room into 3 tables where, a few people would sit at each table, like 4 at each table. And we gave them an assignment. It was, one of those assignments you do at university, like moon landing assignment or something. So, you crash land on the moon and you have 18 materials with you, but you can only bring 10. What do you bring and why? So we gave them the assignment and asked everybody to fill it out individually. And I would pay attention to, who would rush through it and be the first to fill it out, but get them all wrong. And who would be just so paralysis by analysis and get them all right, but be way behind everybody. I'd make little notes on it. And then I would say, okay, now we're going to do it in groups. So take what you figured out, work amongst yourselves, and come back to us with a group answer. And that was the real interview. That was where we figured out, essentially, there were 3 groups of people. So there would be the wallflowers who really didn't contribute much. We weren't interested in them. There were the leaders. These people were the one who were really telling everybody what to do. And then there was what I call the facilitators. These are the people that would be like, oh, Kaylee, what do you think? And okay, John, how about we, dive a little deeper on that one? And it was always the facilitators that we hired. And that helped us to identify really smart people with the right personality. And the funny thing is, we had so many people coming. You'd think a group interview would be intimidating, but people would forget that they were in an interview. And they'd come out of it, they'd be like, that was the best interview I've ever been in. That was so much fun. I don't even care if I get the job. Or I know other people like, oh, I hope I get the job. This is awesome. So that was a really cool way to figure it out. Another thing that we did is we did basically speed dating, but for interviews. So we'd set up stations, and if we were hiring, say, in the paid services team, we'd get everybody on the team would have a question, and then we'd put people through the stations, and everybody would score just on a scale of 1 to 10 for their question, and then we'd compare at the end. And the top 3, it was almost always unanimous. I don't remember a time that it wasn't unanimous who were in the top 3, and usually even who was in the top. And that was a great way to hire as well, because it allowed the team to get involved and feel empowered as part of the process too.
I love that. There's a question from Bill Zolis in the chat right now, sort of in relation to what we were just talking about. So hello, Jennifer. I'm sure you've heard of the Great Resignation. Has this affected your business? My understanding is the culture of foosball tables, etc., is no longer an attraction tool. Have you changed your employee benefits to be able to attract and retain good employees?
That's a great question. Actually, I am going to be talking about the Great Resignation later on in this interview, because it's so every business I know is affected by it. So yes, we've been affected. Everybody has. Like every industry, every business is affected by this. So I'll come back to that, but I do want to talk about what you said about culture and the culture of foosball tables, etc., because we kind of got sucked into that ourselves. We being digital marketing, working with Google and Facebook, and everybody was advertising at one point, like in 2010, 2010 to 2015. There was a lot of like pool tables, foosball tables. We had a whole games room. We had, excuse me, we had a ping pong table, we had a massage chair, we had foosball, like you name it. And at one point, we realized our employee engagement and happiness isn't really where it should be. Like for everything that we're investing in it, we're not seeing the results. And it took us a while to figure out that these things are very superficial. And in fact, sometimes when you have a lot of these things, you attract people who want to come to work to play and not people who are really passionate about their careers. And so, what we realized is that people care about advancing their careers. People want to work for a company that has their shit together. Excuse my language. People want to, work for a company that shares their vision with them and that they know what they need to do to advance. They don't care. Really good people don't care about the superficial things. So that was a hard lesson for us, but one of those lessons we learned along the way.
And obviously creates the team that allows you to be successful now, though, right? Like working through those challenge points. Very interesting. So if you could go back and do something differently, what would it be?
There's probably a number of things, but one of those things is get as good a financial person as early as possible. So most companies, and us included, you'll start out with a bookkeeper because that's what you can afford. It's kind of the bare minimum of what you can, you have to do your taxes, there's regulatory things you have to do, so you spend as little as possible on that. And we were so lucky. We had an incredible bookkeeper, and she went above and beyond and did a great job. But a bookkeeper isn't a controller, and a controller isn't a CFO. So when we moved and added a controller to the list, really we needed a CFO. And then when we added a CFO, that's really when we started learning about our business. And it's so important to understand your numbers. You need to understand whatever your industry is, what are those key metrics that drive your industry? What are those numbers that you have to watch? And what are the leading and lagging indicators? So, you've got business drivers. What are those few metrics that drive your revenue? What are those few metrics that drive your expenses? Most of your financial metrics are lagging indicators. So by the time you see it in your finances, it's already 6 months behind. What are your leading indicators that are driving those numbers? And the more you can peel back the onion and understand your numbers and your business drivers, the more you're going to be making good decisions. Because if you're not understanding what's causing something, then you're solving the wrong problems. So I would say, even though it hurts, because in the early days, it's literally money coming out of your pocket to hire, these, great financial minds. It's critical to taking your business to the next level and taking you as a leader to the next level. You also can't rely on that person to do it all for you. You need to dig in and learn this and understand this for yourself.
Great advice. Thank you. So we've talked a little bit about search engine people, that growth and what, we've seen there. I'd love to dig in a little bit more about your entrepreneurial journey. So you were ranked as one of the top female entrepreneurs in Canada. How did you get there? And what advice do you have for other entrepreneurs?
So a couple of different things. How I got there was a long journey myself. So when I joined Search Engine People, I was in marketing for an insurance company. So I knew a little bit about marketing, but I knew nothing about digital. And really, it was about just diving in and reading and learning everything I could. And so, basic good business principles apply to every business. So, looked around, figured out what the gaps were, just started adding to and trying to fill the gaps. And at one point, I was juggling a lot and actually kind of made the mistake of thinking that I could just do too much. So I was working a lot of hours, and I used to joke around and say that I would sleep when I'm dead. And I didn't know, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you that I didn't know that the body needed rest. And I got run down to the point that I burnt out my thyroid, and my hair started, falling out, and, a lot of side effects. I went to the doctor and I was like, oh, this is an issue. So then I started trying to get help. And that's really when we started growing. I just started hiring for things that I was doing and then replacing myself. And then I'd take on something else that I got to hire and replace that. And then we just started, really growing. So one of those key lessons along the way is learn to take care of yourself and learn that you're not going to be your best you if you're not taking care of yourself. And, not only does the body need rest, the mind needs rest too. So your decision making and even, the person that you show up as at work is really affected if you're sleep deprived. And the person I was 10 years ago is very different than the person I am today because I was so sleep deprived and just like focused on juggling all of these balls. And so that's a really good lesson. The other thing is, I love the quote that Wayne Gretzky has: you miss 100% of the shots you never take. And I want to talk about, being on some of the lists that we've been on and, awards that we've been fortunate to win. We were on those lists because someone nominated us or, because we sought them out ourselves. And I would encourage that as a leader. A lot of CEOs are pretty humble and they don't want the spotlight. I always am a little embarrassed by the spotlight myself. And you don't want to put yourself out there to go on a list because you don't really think like you're going to make it. And in fact, the first time we were on the Great Workplaces list, I signed up for it, not because we thought we would even make it on the list, but because I had heard about it from someone else. And you can sign up to get a lot of additional insights about your company. And we were going through some growing pains at the time. This was at the time when we were trying to figure out culture and just sort of go from one plateau to the next. Mm-hmm. And so I love the idea of having a unbiased third-party survey that, the team could feel really, really comfortable with being as honest as possible about who we were as a company and what we could do differently. And I didn't think we would make it on the list. I thought we'd do the survey, get the results, figure out what we need to work on, do the survey the next year, get the results, figure out what we need to work on, and eventually we'd earn the list. We were shocked that we did make it on the list the first year. I think we were number 38. But the insights that we got from, that survey and learning about ourselves and focusing on the things that we could do better and not, focusing on the accolades, that was a really important part of this journey.
Interesting. I'm wondering, sort of I'll even say a selfish question, but I think the comments that you made about taking care of yourself and not experiencing burnout are so important, and so challenging to strike that balance and understand when you're working for growth and for yourself. How did you make some of those positive changes, Jennifer, to be the person you are today versus how you were 10 years ago? I think all of us are always searching for self-care tips or what have you, but anything that, you intentionally changed in how your day looked that helped to make that impactful difference so you could show up as your best self each day?
So for me, it was absolutely an evolution and not a revolution. I'm still working on myself. And, part of it was not trying to do everything. Jeff, who started Search Engine People, he was famous for saying, I'm not the best at this. I'm going to hire someone who is, and I'm going to rely on them. Mm-hmm. And it took me a little bit longer to learn that lesson. So I needed to rely on the team a little bit more and find people who were better at the things that I was doing than I was. So hiring some of those key roles, I was doing all of the hiring at one point. And, when we hired an HR manager, that was a game changer because I could focus on more operational things. Learning to kind of appreciate my needs and understand that my needs are important as well. So part of my challenge is we have 3 kids, and when the business took off, when I started Search Engine People, we had our 3rd child a year later. And so at that point, the business was just skyrocketing. We were on Profit 100's list of the fastest growing companies for 6 years in a row. Like it was crazy. And when our youngest was born, I didn't even get a maternity leave. Mm-hmm. I worked from home for 3 months, and I was, the next week I did payroll. I was doing meetings with her cradling her in my arm and on the phone. And, I definitely, that's how I kind of burnt myself out. Mm-hmm. And so I just started getting the help. We hired a nanny. At one point, I hired someone to help around the house, like with cleaning. And you have to think about, like, what's the best way for you to focus your time, mm-hmm. and the best way, the dollar value of money. If I could have someone else do it and probably do it better, whether it be at work or at home, then that's a good way to be. And every time, we put out that extra expense, we got it back 10 times over. So don't be afraid to identify the help that you need, whether it be, any aspect of your life, or within your work and your business, and get that help because it will pay you back. And I think that for me, becoming a better person was really about not being sleep deprived, and just taking a little bit of time to smell the roses. Mm-hmm. The other thing is I did a lot of reading. I didn't have a lot of leadership experience coming into this, and I always felt like the company deserved better. And as it grew, I knew I needed to grow with it. So I was constantly reading. And for me, one of the things that made that possible is I use Audible, and mm-hmm. I would listen to my books, and I would always multitask. So if I was walking the dogs, I'd listen to a book, and then I'd open the Evernote app, and I'd be like, whoa, talking about my thoughts so that I wouldn't forget things. Mm-hmm. And, that's a great, if you're driving, if you're on a long car ride, let's say you're going to see a client or something, you can be working on yourself as you do that. And so I spent a lot of years doing that. I still love a good business book, and that's had a huge impact on my journey as well.
Thanks. I think that's really impactful advice. There's a question in the chat from Bill again. And so we'll kind of go into that because it's along the lines of what we've been speaking about. So how has your company dealt with working at home? And have you changed anything at work with regards to mental health?
That's a great question, Bill. Thank you. So we always had the ability to work from home. We fortunately, before COVID, we had a vision that we wanted to be able to work from anywhere in the world from any device. And so we had spent about 2 years before COVID trying to make that happen. So moving to the cloud and putting everything online and just securing up our systems. So that was really helpful because although we had the capability technically to be able to do it, we at that point we're saying, okay, we want you to come in 2 days a week, and as a lot of companies did, because a big part of our business and our industry is about learning, and there's so much learning and development that happened in a team environment. So when COVID hit, I would say probably in about June or July, I was looking at it thinking, I don't think that this is going away anytime soon. And I think that if we're in, potentially some form of lockdown for the next 18 months, are people really going to want to come back to the office? So I made the call early and said, you know what? We're not going to make you come back. You can go and live your best life, go buy a cottage, live in cottage country, get out of that tiny apartment that's not set up for working from home, go move to a less expensive market. And basically, as a company, culturally, we had to adapt to everybody working from home. Now, we still have an office. I'm in the office, and we have people who prefer to come to the office. But for me, I think the big learning is that people like choice. People want to have the ability. Some people prefer to come into the office. Some people prefer to work from home, and people want to have that flexibility. So, mental health, I think recognizing that, making sure that people know that they can sign off, that just because they're working from home, that we're not expecting them to be available 24/7. I think that that's really important. Mm-hmm. But I also think flexibility is important. So if somebody needs to go pick up their kids from, school, and they want to sign on after work because they're trying to juggle their workday, especially when daycares were closed down, like, we had to be flexible and let people figure out their schedules, but understanding that, they have to understand that we're not expecting the world from everybody either. And there were some times where, it was really hard on people, especially when the daycares were closed and people had, their kids at home. I mean, I was lucky. Our kids are older, so, it wasn't as hard for me personally as it was for some of the team that had younger children, but recognizing how hard that was. And there were times where we said to someone, like, take a little bit of extra time, take a few extra days off. We tried to be flexible with people's work schedules so that they could fit it in and make it work, and just recognize that burnout is a real thing. And we invest so much in our people. There's a lot of training and development. So, and we care about our people too. So you don't want them to burn out. And sometimes you have to ask them to take vacation. You have to, tell them, I think you need a bit of a break. Yeah. And be on the lookout for that, because a lot of people won't recognize it themselves, or maybe they don't feel comfortable asking for what they need. So as a manager, you need to be in tune with your team's needs.
I think to the earlier conversation around, more trivial things like foosball tables and pool tables, how much more important is it to have a compassionate and flexible employer to, promote that work-life balance that we're challenged with through COVID. So thanks for sharing that. One follow-up I had to something based on Bill's question, something you had said, you shared the example with us earlier about team interviews that you had done sort of at starting time and then going to remote work. Have you found really positive ways to continue that collaboration within your team members to ensure, that you're getting not only that connection point with your colleagues day to day, but the type of idea generation that you would look for normally? Have you found success in that still moving to a virtual or remote work format?
It's something that we're still working on. I would say like we talk to the team a lot and do surveys and ask, especially new people who are starting with search engine people. So we've hired a lot of people through this. We've been fortunate to have some growth. And so, I worry about what's that experience for new people who maybe come to the office or have never even been to the office. They come to pick up their computer. They've never been there. So we talk to people about how is it going. I think that this is something that culturally as a society, we still have to figure out how to do this well. It's something that I think that we're doing an okay job. We're trying hard to have all the resources online. We've gotten some really good feedback from the team saying that we have everything organized and everything's online and we've made it smooth. But the thing that I worry about is culture. Before, our culture was built around going on coffee runs and getting together with people and having a lunch together, and these things that aren't happening anymore. And the teams are putting in a good effort to do something else. So get together on a weekly basis and chat, and not necessarily, talk about business all the time. We've got, some people, our CFO, for example, he doesn't necessarily interact with everybody. So he was just booking coffee chats online, and people would be like, why is our CFO booking a meeting with me? But, you just have to go over and above to try and meet people and talk to people. I've been booking coffee chats with teammates to just check in and talk to them and not talk about business at all, but just find out about what's going on in their life and build a relationship with people. I think building a relationship in new ways is going to be key, because relationships are so important in business. And I feel like a lot of leaders say, oh, I have an open door policy. But if I've never even spoken to you, how open is my door? So I think that just reaching out to people and getting to know them and checking in, it's a step in the right direction, at least, but we haven't figured it out.
And I think, to your comment on the open door policy, it's so important to have that balance of relationship building, but also trust and vulnerability so that people feel they can share openly for whatever it might be that you're connecting on. So next question, and this is, one of the questions that I'm really excited to ask, and one of the reasons I was so thrilled to be interviewing you today, as I've, experienced this myself. So your industry is often male dominated. Did you ever feel like gender was holding you back? And do you have any advice for other female leaders in male dominated industries?
That's a great question. So I have walked into meetings, and especially, meetings where it's a lot of other CEOs, and being the only woman in the group. Unfortunately, Canada is doing very well in terms of, leading the world in terms of percentage of female CEOs. But the last time I checked, I think it was still 3%. So it's an issue. I have been lucky. I have never felt like somebody didn't respect me or I never felt held back by anybody else. But I want to talk about the fact that, there was a couple of times where I almost held me back. And I think that this is common. It's potentially an issue for a lot of women. I think that, how women are portrayed in media, you've got Martha Stewart and the Hallmark Channel, and you've got, women having perfect lives and perfect homes and being perfect mothers. And everybody wants to be perfect at everything, especially I think CEOs have a high need for achievement. So, or whether you're a CEO or you're climbing the ladder and maybe you'll be a CEO at some point in your life or just a leader of any kind, people with drive who are climbing that ladder have a need for achievement. They want to be good at everything that they do. And there's a huge pressure to be, great in your home life too. And when you're working crazy hours and driving yourself, it's easy to say, to experience what I call like the mom guilt, and to say, am I being selfish, and am I being a good mom? And there's actually 2 times I almost took myself out. So the first time, it was not here at Search Engine People. It was in my previous company, and I was in a I don't know, junior management position, and there was my dream job came available, and I didn't apply for it. And the reason I didn't apply for it is I thought to myself, I would absolutely love that job, but I'm not ready for it. So, hopefully maybe it'll come up again in a year or 2 years, and, then I'll apply for it. And I was really lucky because the person who was hiring for the position called me and said, Jen, like, why didn't you apply for this? And I told them, like, they were like, aren't you interested? And I was like, yeah, this is my dream job, but I'm not ready. And they're like, we think you should apply. And, they knew I was ready. And I ended up doing a great job. But I didn't know I was ready. And I think that this is really common. In fact, I've read about this in some of my many business books that I've read. A lot of culturally, men will often say, I think I can do it, and therefore I'm going to try. And women will often say, I haven't done it yet, so I'm not ready. And this is something that, we need to not be that speed bump in our own careers. We need to realize that if we have transferable skills, that potentially we could do a good job too, and not take ourselves out of the running. So and I think that that's good advice too. It's not necessarily a male-female thing. I think that's just good advice for anybody who's afraid to give it a go. On the other side, the second time I almost took myself out of the running was a time that I was really challenged with juggling things between home and work. And one of my kids was having difficulty at school. One of our kids was having difficulty at school. And I was putting myself through all kinds of that guilt. And so I actually made the decision that I was going to resign. And I'm so lucky. Jeff, my husband, has been incredibly supportive throughout my career. And so he basically said, like, whatever you need, do what you need. And so we brought we had a couple partners at the time, and brought our partners in, and I told them that I was going to resign, and that I was having trouble balancing everything. And they actually talked me out of it. they basically said, like, Jen, we need you. Like, this is nuts. Don't resign. Take the summer off. Like, take the summer off. Do what you need to do. Get stuff organized. Figure it out, and then see how you feel when you come back. And that was just phenomenal advice. And I'm so grateful to them for encouraging me not to take myself out of the game.
I love that you've had that support network around you to continue moving forward, Jennifer. From your perspective, what are the biggest roadblocks to success as an entrepreneur?
So I've talked a little bit about how I was always reading. I think, again, a lot of the roadblocks to your success are the roadblocks that you put in front of yourself. Mm-hmm. So, when you first start a business, you have to wear a lot of hats. You have to be good at marketing. You have to be good at HR. You have to be good at finance. You have to be good at operations. And most people, when they start a business, they're good at what they do. So if you're, electrician, you're a great electrician, but maybe you don't know anything about HR or marketing. And, being able to wear those hats is really difficult. So, you have to be open to constantly learning and figuring it out. Because you may not be able to afford to hire all of those roles, and you're going to have to wear those hats. Mm-hmm. Or even when you're able to hire for those roles, you need to know enough about them to be able to be a thought partner with them. So, that's a key thing, constantly working on yourself. The other thing, though, that I think that leaders don't talk about enough is managing your own psyche. Running a business is an emotional roller coaster. You have very extreme highs, you have very extreme lows, and sometimes you have them in the same day. And it's exhausting. And I know a lot of leaders who suffer from depression and anxiety. And it's I think, because it's all riding on you. And or at least it feels that way. It's not. You have a good team, but it feels that way at times. And those you have to figure out how to even out the roller coaster. So even if it means that you can't let yourself get so high when the highs come, because then the drop is really hard. And when the lows come, you have to get a thicker skin. And unfortunately, the way to build a thicker skin is just to go through those lows and realize that you came out the other side and you survived. Mm-hmm. But I think that, those are some of the biggest roadblocks. And I think that that we don't talk about it enough. So I really wanted to talk about that today.
Yeah, thank you. I want to dive into the next question that you sort of touched on a little bit in some of what you just shared, but what do you feel are the key attributes to being a good leader?
So I think there's 3 things that are really important to being a good leader. The number one thing is I really do think that you have to care about your people. So, you can be a strong individual contributor. You can be a solopreneur, and, you can be very successful, but being a leader is about having people around you. And if you don't care about people, like truly care about them, then, why would they want to stick it out with you when things are tough? Mm-hmm. So I think caring is really important. In fact, that brings me to the second kind of thing I think is important is building relationships. There's something that, we call the trust bank. So as you build relationships, you can put deposits into the trust bank. You can take withdrawals out of the trust bank. And you need to make sure that you're always putting more deposits into the trust bank than withdrawals. And how do you put deposits into that trust bank? Well, you get to know people. You find out about their families. You care. You build a real relationship, not just a superficial relationship. And building trust and building relationships is one of those lessons that I had to learn how to do, because naturally I'm introverted, and it wasn't something that I knew how to do well. Jeff's very extroverted, and he kind of took care of relationships for a long time for us. And at one point I realized I have to build my own relationships. And I'm so thankful that I did, because I had no idea what I was missing. Just the richness that even you get out of it. Mm-hmm. And the trust goes both ways. It's not just earning the trust of your team, but it's also trusting your team. And you can't have that kind of relationship if you don't know each other well. The last thing I wanted to talk about is transparency. Transparency is something that is really hard for leaders, because you don't know if you share a lot of information, like TMI, you don't know how it's going to go. If I share information about my financials or our financials, if I share information about, other things that most leaders keep like really tight to their chest, you don't know what's going to happen. And we started being a lot more transparent a number of years ago, and we've just got more and more transparent as the time's gone by. And I realized, never has it gone wrong for us. And in fact, it's the only way you can get people all rowing in the same direction. Like, unless your company objectives are the team's objectives, and you share information about how you're doing, how else can you get everyone rowing in the same direction? But it's scary. It's scary at first. And there is a vulnerability to that, 100%. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget when COVID first hit, I tried to communicate a lot to the team. And unfortunately, at that time, none of us had a lot of visibility on what was coming in the horizon. And as a leader, generally you get used to making decisions with like maybe 70% visibility. You never have 100%. But I would say COVID, it was like more like 10% visibility. Like we just didn't know what was happening. And I'll never forget, that when it first hit, when I made the decision to shut down the office, it was about a week before the rest of the country shut down. And at the time, I called everybody into a team meeting, like just spur of the moment that morning, and said, guys, we're shutting down. And I thought, they're going to think that I'm paranoid. They're going to think I'm pulling the trigger too early, and that I'm totally paranoid. And, there's a vulnerability to just sharing and being transparent and saying, hey, I'm worried about this. Or that first town hall afterwards where I shared with the team, like, I don't know how this is going to go, but, I'm going to share with you everything that I know, and we work through it together. Mm-hmm. And, I felt at that time, that was a painful meeting, not knowing. Mm-hmm. But it was amazing because the team just rallied around each other. Everybody rallied. And in the end, we ended up actually doing quite well, but it was only because the team rallied together. And I think that, if you're the kind of leader that doesn't share and isn't transparent, I just don't think that you're going to, again, like build that kind of a team that cares about each other and that helps and supports each other in the hard times. And, COVID was very unique, but there's always going to be hard times in the life of a business. So, these, building relationships, building trust, having transparency will support you during those hard times.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jennifer. That resonates so well for me. I think the more transparent and open you can be, regardless of what the scope is, that's going to create, fill the trust bucket that you talked about earlier. But also ensure that there's passion and drive and commitment behind a shared vision. If they understand the vision and can buy into it in the same way because you've shared enough about why, I have always found that that's done nothing but prove good benefits in outcome for me. I also think that we all have very vivid memories of whatever those team meetings or that final day in an office looked like pre-COVID. I remember packing up a box and being told, see you in 2 weeks, and longest 2 weeks of my life. I'm going to ask one more scripted question that I have here, a prepared question, and then there's a few that I think will dovetail in from the chat. So I'm going to jump ahead to what are some of the challenges running a business today, and what advice do you have for other entrepreneurs?
So today, I think everybody is dealing with two big issues. There's supply chain issues, and there's the Great Resignation. And these are issues that just about every business I know is dealing with. Because if you don't have, let's say you're in a services business and you don't have, say, physical goods in a supply chain, maybe your customers do, and they're getting impacted by this. So, these are issues that are complex, that we're all dealing with, that we're all trying to figure it out. And one of the things that I would say is advice that I'm certainly taking myself is to build a network of trusted advisors to help figure out these very complex issues. So I personally belong to a CEO group. It's called Tech, the Executive Committee, and it's a group of other CEOs from other industries who meet monthly and talk about these massive business challenges. And that was an incredible support through COVID to be able to share information. Where can we get testing kits when they weren't readily available? Or how are we handling the work from home? Or how are we handling some of the potential HR issues that have arisen? Or how do you build a culture when everyone's at home? So having that network was really important, and I highly recommend that other people create a network, whether it's join a business group or build a network for themselves. Something else I've done is I've also built a network of other agencies within our industry. So companies will quite often be hesitant to share information amongst their competitors. But, our industry is so diverse. It's so scattered. There are people that I talk to in this network that I'm in that we never bump up against each other, not ever. Some of them are in the US, we'll never ever bump into them. So why not help each other? Because what we do is hard. And it's amazing to be able to share operational issues with each other as well and figure out, what's normal, what's not normal, what are they seeing, how are they handling some of these issues. And that's something that anybody could do. It really requires reaching out to somebody, another business leader, and just saying hey, do you want to get together for a coffee? And that's easier than ever before because coffee is always online now. So it could be somebody from, Texas or even, overseas.
Mm-hmm.
So building that network, I think, is one of those ways that helps figure out these big challenges, the Great Resignation and the supply chain issues.
Great advice. And so one of the questions that have come through is sort of along the lines of the Great Resignation again. So your industry is very competitive. Now that most can work for a global company from anywhere, we have many IT clients that are losing employees due to extremely high salary offers from competitors, et cetera. I know it is not just about salary, but how do you compete?
That's a great question. It's not just about salary, but I know lots of companies who have lost people who, didn't even want to leave. But at the end of the day, people do have to take control of their own careers, and people have to do what's best for themselves too. And nobody's going to manage your career as well as you will. So you really have to be your own biggest advocate, which means that if somebody offers you 50% more than what you're earning, you're going to take it. Even if you love the company, you're going to take it. So, how do you compete? I think that, first of all, you have to realize that this is a phenomenon that's happening in the world. It's not necessarily you. I think that retaining really good people it's more than about money. It is about making sure that people have a path and making sure that they know what that path is. And as a company, you don't always have that next step for people when they're ready for it. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, you will lose good people. And that's okay. Again, people have a right to have a great career and do what's best for them. And so I would never stand in the way of somebody that, needed to find their next step elsewhere. Mm-hmm. But as much as you can make sure that they know that their next step is with you, that's going to be very helpful. The other thing is, I think that as leaders, we need to know that this is happening, like not have our heads in the sand and accept the fact that turnover is going to be a little higher than it's been in the past, and figure out how do we make onboarding new people easier. So, just as there's more people leaving, there's more people coming. And we've found that, we've had the good fortune to attract some incredible talent through this, and that people are a little bit more mobile right now. So as much as that's a challenge, it's also an opportunity. Mm-hmm. So part of it's your mindset too of how you're going to approach this challenge. Part of it is figuring out, okay, if we're suddenly going to be onboarding more people than we've done in the past, how do we make that go smooth? What resources do we need? Do we have an HR person who is strong at recruiting, or is our HR person more focused on other things? Do we have processes in place so that we can get people trained and ramped up easily? These are things that we all have to be working on, because this is an issue that we're all going to have to deal with, I think, at least for the next year. People are examining their lives and saying, am I happy? Am I living my best life? And they're making decisions. And this is something that is just happening. So, how do we work within that?
Thanks, Jen. So in the key attributes for being a good leader, you had mentioned relationships. So one of the questions in the chat that we have is it true that building relationships, the traditional style, will be quite difficult in a COVID world? And what can be done effectively in this case? I know you mentioned some things like virtual coffees and being more intentional in your reach out. Any other thoughts around relationship building in a remote setting?
I'm trying to think of what I haven't touched on already. Yes, like traditional style, it's very difficult to do, because even if your company is moving to a more remote model, you might have people who are, teammates that are in another time zone. So I think that, again, being intentional in reach outs, sharing, giving before you expect to get. All the basics of building a relationship are truisms that are true whether you're face to face or whether we're interacting like this. I do think that it's important as a company to have a cameras on policy. So that's something that we did. It's hard to build a relationship when you can't see someone's, like we pick up cues from people's facial reactions, from their body, posture. And I think that cameras are really important. More communication than before, intentional communication, and not being afraid to be vulnerable yourself so that you're sharing so that they also feel comfortable sharing.
Perfect.
And if you're introverted, and you're a leader, then you have to understand that that's not an excuse not to reach out to your team. You have to reach out, whether it's comfortable to you or not. You have to reach out, and as you put yourself out there more often, then it will become more comfortable.
Great, thank you. The final question I have in the chat right now, and I think this is a good one to end sort of our entrepreneurial based questions and your journey. So from Pat Doyle, entrepreneurialism is hard work and so much more than just hanging up a sign. What's one thing you would tell someone just beginning their entrepreneurial journey?
Wow, that's a great question. I think that I would tell them that never give up. That you're going to have so many failures along the way. And, all of these are tough lessons. And in fact, the best lessons we ever learned were those hard lessons from our failures. So if you're not failing, I know it's a cliche, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. But I think that as long as you're not making those same mistakes over and over again, it's okay to be making mistakes, because that's where your biggest learnings are going to come from. And just keep going.
I love that. It goes back to the quote you shared earlier, Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So a few questions that we'll dig into around digital marketing. So what's the biggest challenge facing digital marketing teams today?
So it's funny, I started this chat talking about how hard it was to find and retain great talent. And that's still one of the biggest issues today, partially because of the Great Resignation, but also because digital marketing has gotten so complex over the years. In the early days, there were only a couple of platforms. The algorithms weren't very complex. It wasn't really that hard. But today you've got so many platforms. You've got, Google, you've got Facebook, you've got, all kinds of platforms. You've got all kinds of software that our businesses integrate with. You've got data, you've got mobile, you've got desktop. Like, it's so complex. Keeping on top of all of that is really difficult. And figuring out, how to keep your team on top of it all, so that when clients ask you a question, you have good answers, or the answer isn't always, oh, let me check with an expert. That's a really, really tough part of, digital marketing teams, whether it's an agency or an in-house team. Just, finding people who have those answers, and then, keeping up with the knowledge as it changes.
Awesome. I love this next question. So what aspects of digital marketing should entrepreneurs be focusing on?
So I would say, one of the biggest aspects that digital marketers should be focused on is their analytics. You need to, if you're not using analytics, whether it be, an expensive paid software or even Google Analytics. A lot of large organizations run their businesses on Google Analytics, and it's a free platform. Learn how to dig into the numbers, learn what those important numbers are, and how to do analysis of the data, because it's the numbers that are going to tell you what your next move is. So if you think about the buying cycle, you've got, an impression. Someone maybe hears about you or has a need, and they go looking. They first, find out about your company. Maybe they go to your website. Then they become a lead. Maybe they fill out a form or phone you, and then ultimately become a customer. Understanding all of the metrics along the way, figuring out how to get the data every step along the way, and then understanding your ratio. So is, my impression to click ratio what it needs to be? If not, then maybe we need to work on our ads. Is my click to conversion ratio, like my traffic to conversion ratio, where it needs to be? If not, maybe you need to work on your website or your customer journey. Is my journey from a lead to a sale where it needs to be? If not, maybe I need to be doing phone tracking and understand, like, are we answering the phone as much as we need to? Do we need to have the phones manned at night? Or, is the person answering the phone, do they need some coaching? So understanding your metrics and, tying those data points together is something that we see as being one of the biggest challenges that a lot of our clients come to us with. And it's important because it'll tell you where to go next.
Do you have any tips for driving more traffic to a website?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing that you have to do is you have to figure out, are people searching for, is your customer searching for your business, or do they not know that it exists? So, if your potential customers are doing searches on search engines, then you have to figure out what the keywords are that they're using, and then optimize your site to rank well for those keywords. But some people have businesses that, their customers aren't looking for them actively. So in that case, search engines isn't really going to help you out. You have to probably get in front of them, in an intrusive way when they're not looking for you. Kind of like in the old days, a billboard. Today our billboards are social media or, display marketing. So understanding, that customer journey and understanding what that start of the journey is, I think that's the number one thing you can do to help drive more traffic to your website, is to figure out, where does that all start? And then you have to be there with the right message at the right time. So again, also understanding your customer and what appeals to them. What is that right message?
I think it's so interesting to look at, putting yourself in that customer-driven shoes and understanding what I like the way you phrased it, understanding the customer journey. It's not just about slapping up some content and thinking, okay, there we go, job is done. It's really digging in and understanding what those next steps are and what the process looks like. Are there any aspects or benefits to digital marketing that you feel are often overlooked and shouldn't be?
I feel like sometimes in digital marketing, people are attracted to that new shiny thing, whether it be a beta or whether it be a new search engine or a new social media platform. But what we found is that digital marketing isn't really about the shiny things. It's about the elbow grease. It's about doing those like tried and true things that work. They're maybe not so exciting. So, focus on those good old-fashioned marketing doesn't go away. Understanding your customer, understanding their journey is now online. In fact, I don't even like to call it digital marketing, because this is just marketing now. This is just marketing. And I wanted to talk about, one thing that's overlooked is content. How does your content stand out? And one of the things that I think is a mistake that a lot of companies make is they understand that content is really important. Like, there's a whole industry around content marketing, and content is very, very important to becoming a thought leader in your industry, or attracting a customer to your business or your brand. But the mistake that people make is they assign content development to the most junior person. And, all due respect to people who are new in their careers and starting out, it's not anything about that. But having a content strategy is about building incredible content, incredible experiences. And in order to do that, you need to be a thought leader, and you need to be passionate about your business and about what you do. So assigning it to someone that isn't passionate about your business, doesn't know your business like you do, it's gonna possibly make for a content strategy that doesn't really work. And my advice here would be, create as much content as you can do really well. So don't worry about these ideas of, I need to do a piece of content a week, or I need to have 30 social media posts a month, or, create great content, and your content strategy will be much more effective.
I love that advice. So, thinking about where you're assigning the content development, any other suggestions on what not to do when it comes to digital marketing, or let's stretch digital when it comes to marketing?
Absolutely. So I would say, two things. The number one thing is, don't launch a campaign without any way to track its success, because then you're just spending money. And that quote, I know 50% of my marketing is working, I just don't know what 50%. That's an old quote. And we have technology today. We have ways of knowing what's working, exactly what's working. And so you need to not spend money on marketing if you don't have a way to track it, unless you have lots of money to spend, in which case go ahead. But I've never, ever, we work with a lot of really big companies. I've never met a company that had enough marketing budget. So we really do have to make good decisions about how we use it. Mm-hmm. The second one is, a lot of times in marketing, we think about marketing to be to the point where that lead comes in. And then it's like, okay, I'm a marketer, my job's done. But we have to connect the dots to what happens to that lead. So if you drive leads and there's nobody there to receive it at the other end, then again, you're going to be wasting your marketing dollars. You have to think about, what's that process? Do I need software to collect the leads? And do I have an operations person who's assigned to reach out to those leads? Like, what are your operational processes around receiving the leads and responding to them well? Mm-hmm. Do I have call tracking software? Am I able to listen to some of the phone calls and make sure that the customers are getting received with a great reception? Are my phones getting answered? Like, figuring out what happened once that lead comes in is really important too. And it's often overlooked because marketing stops, and these are operational issues, but these are business issues. It's a whole process.
Absolutely. How do you keep current on new trends or technologies in your industry?
Well, I think I've probably said about 3 times, I read a lot. Reading is very important. And in this business in particular, I don't know any other industry that has so much free information available. There are so many courses that you can take for free. There is so much information available from very worthwhile, credible sources. So I would say really good digital marketers stay on top of what's current by reading a lot. But I would say great digital marketers learn not just by reading, they read, but they also do. So running your own experiments, figuring out what's next, comparing, this ad versus that ad, or learning the nuances that you're not going to read in an article. Learning by doing and running experiments is how great marketers are born.
Awesome. Jennifer, we've covered so much ground over the past hour and a bit. Any final thoughts you want to leave with our entrepreneurial community today?
So I would say that, as an entrepreneur, sometimes you're looking at other companies who are more successful than you are, and you think like, wow, they make it look easy. But I feel like, when you learn the backstory to those companies, it was never easy. I'm a very good friend of mine shared with me, an analogy that when you see a duck swimming on a pond or a lake, they just seem like they're just gliding effortlessly. But underneath, what you don't see is those legs just going and, scrappy, working hard. It's not easy. You're making mistakes. And, most companies that are an overnight success were 20 years in the making, before anybody started paying attention to them. And even if they did become an overnight success, there were challenges. Those legs were paddling under the water, even though it wasn't clear that they were. So I would say, keep working on your business. Nothing worthwhile is easy, and just don't let them see you sweat.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, for joining us today. I've absolutely loved my time learning from you, asking you questions. And I know for one, I'm more inspired walking away today than I was coming in. So thank you very much for joining our community today.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about this. Obviously, running a business, digital marketing is a passion for me, but running a business is a passion too. And this has been an absolute thrill. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. This Startup Grind was brought to you by Spark Center in partnership with Launch Lab. Be sure to stay tuned to Spark Center's social pages for details about upcoming Startup Grind events in the new year. And while Spark Center doesn't have a Startup Grind event in December, they do have a magazine issue being released. Visit thesparkmagazine.ca to subscribe for your free print and or digital copy of the Winter 2021 Trends issue of the Spark Business and Innovation magazine. Now it's time for networking. If you wish to join us, you can navigate to this section by clicking the icon on the left side of your screen. You'll be paired up with one person at a time for 3 minutes. You can use this time to get to know each other, and you'll have the option to extend the session if desired. Once the time is up, press ready and Hopin will automatically move you to the next person. It's like speed dating, but networking. Click the connect button if you'd like to virtually exchange business cards and add this person to your network. Thank you again, everybody, and take good care.